Welcome back to the H2O Hustle Podcast, where we talk about the utility industry, water, wastewater, steam and boiler operations, leadership, professional growth, and what it takes to continuing develop as an operator with passion, purpose, and precision. I'm Jamel, and I'm glad to be with you today. And I'm going to be starting a new series dealing with leadership and faith and life. And the title of my new series is going to be called H2O Hustle Pages with Purpose, where faith, leadership, and life meet. And today, I want to talk to you about a book, um, more so just, take whatever the book has meant to me in my life and what it has done for me in my journey and talk about that. But the book that I want to talk to you about today is by the author John C. Maxwell, and it's the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And today we're going to be talking about one of the laws, and that is the law of process. And the law of process is a very big concept, but I'm just going to tell you why it stood out to me personally because I seen through my life or what being a leader is about and how this correlates with my life and how things work as a process and those type of things. But this is a great book and something for us to think about before we get started is how this book and how this principle shows up in our life and in our career is that a good thing that we can ask ourselves is, are we so focused on where we want to go that we overlook who we need to become to get there? Because everything is like a process. So that's the big idea of this law, is that the law of process is something that you start somewhere and you grow into something bigger and better. So one thing about it though is that when we think of leadership, leadership is a process. So not everybody wakes up one day and is a CEO of a 500 fortune company or a big business guru, or they're not like an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates or a you know even in sports like a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan or somebody like that. Like leadership is a process, so we have to understand that, especially like in the work world or in life in general, is that leadership is not created instantly by a promotion, a title, a certification, or a new position. Those things are they it shows us that we cannot um instantly think just because we got a piece of paper that makes us or gives us credibility in what we're doing and how we're presenting ourselves in the world. So leadership is a process, and everybody has to start somewhere from day one. And to talk about that and to explain more about it is that simply somebody can't um, they can't say that they have a leadership role or a leadership in their life just by accumulating years of experience. There are many people that have been at jobs for many years, but when you look at their life, they're not developing themselves. They're not becoming better people. They're not becoming better leaders. They're just people that have a piece of paper that says, "Hey, I did this, but I'm really losing credibility with others because I don't have the leadership uh, prowess, so to speak, or the leadership credibility." So, leadership is a process, and when we look at that, we have to know that um, that leadership, we have to know that we have to have the knowledge, then the repetition, then the experience and the mistakes, and then we reflect on those and then we grow. And it's kind of like a cycle that we have to go to when we develop as leaders, no matter what position we're in or no matter what industry we're in. And one thing about it is that um, we have to emphasize consistency. You know, small actions performed repeatedly can produce major growth over time. So when I think about that, I know many people probably have known this, but like, you ever seen where it's like drops of water will continue to hit a rock, and over time that water will create a will create like a breaking through of the rock and eating away and chipping away and corroding the rock to where it'll split the rock in half. But we got to realize that all that work, it took a very long time for that rock to be split in half by the drips or drops of water. And we have to emphasize consistency each and every day. So as leaders, so that's something that we know, that when we think about leadership as a process, it's the same way. It's consistency every day. Is doing things and putting in the work each and every day to become a better leader at home, at work, and everywhere that we are. Um, so just like how in the water and wastewater industry, or even the steam industry, an operator, they can't cram years of plant experience into one weekend. Like, you're not going to be um, plant superintendent in a weekend. You know, it takes time. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of work. So I want to read this quote by Saint Francis of Assisi, and he said, "Start by doing what is necessary, then do what is possible, and suddenly you're doing the impossible." So you see, even in that quote, that you got to start by doing what's necessary. You got to start by doing the things that needs to be done first, and then once you do those, then you're doing what's possible, and then before you know it, you're doing what's impossible, the thing that you couldn't dream of doing, and then now you're suddenly doing that. So, but when I talk about the law of process in my life and how I look at my story, I started out in the wastewater industry in about 2013. And that's when I really, at that time, being in my, mid to late 20s, that's when I had one of my first major jobs that I thought was like, this is big time. Like, I mean, getting paid, decent money, and, all those things. And, and I quickly found out that it is a process. Life in general is just a process, and like how, the Lord and Christ and God, how he does things for us and how he shows us that it's a process, that we don't just go from, A to Z, or 0 to 100 that fast. And I was working at this wastewater plant back in my hometown, and I really was liking the job and everything, and things was going well at a point, and then my personal life started to creep in and catch up to me, and I ended up quitting on my boss, and then from there it was a snowball effect to where, like, my life was just not going as well. And I'm not gonna go all into the details, but I will say that I learned a lot during that time. But at that time, I thought I was just gonna come in there, work this job, and get my license, my like wastewater license, and then just keep growing and going up and up and up. And, for whatever reason, God allowed me to go through the things that I went through, and it shows that it was a process. But, like I was saying, 2014, that was a little while ago. And, just looking back at that, it shows me that, God is still good, because now, um, I'm licensed as a wastewater operator. I'm licensed as a water operator, and I'm licensed as in the thermal plant space, or thermal plant operator, um, third class of a facility operating engineer. So in the power plant space. But I went from working at that wastewater plant, then my life fell apart a little bit, and then years went by, and then I got an opportunity to uh be a waste or not a wastewater, excuse me, a water treatment operator for a little town. And then after that, then I left and went into the power plant. But this is all in pretty much a 12-year span. I went from my life being, broken down, and God having to do a lot of work in me, and God having to show me a lot of things, to now that I'm licensed and operating and doing all these things. But and I also got the chance to learn a lot through all of this, and do a whole bunch of things. So I'm glad about it. And but that's what the law of process is that I just didn't, come in day one and have these 3 certifications and license and believe that I was, big time or something. You know what I'm saying? So I just think that that just shows you that, growing into a new industry, growing into a new opportunity, it just shows you, what God can do, but you got to be willing to go through the process. And even now, like, I'm starting into this new power plant space and a power plant job, and it's like starting all over again. It's like, okay, I got a license, but how am I going to lead myself? How am I growing every day? How am I reading and getting mentorship, and doing all these types of things, so that someone can understand where I'm coming from, and like what I want to do and what I want to accomplish. So I just think, looking back on all that, it just showed how God works, is that, he takes the broken things of our lives, and then he makes them beautiful when we surrender to him and when we trust in him. And I'm truly a believer in that, and I've seen it in my life. So, but, there were opportunities I wanted before the person I am today. And looking back, the process was preparing me for things I couldn't even see yet. So I just thank God for that. And then we, talking about all of this, it leads us to understand is that in the water or wastewater or even the steam industry, this law of process is directly related to that, because, we don't come in to these industries as a big leader. We come in as a trainee, then an operator, then an experienced operator. Then we mentor somebody. We show them the ropes, and we tell them how to, be a good operator. And then it goes to a leader. But I do want to say is that people, we are all leaders before we get a title. Each and every day we're leading somebody. You may not be a leader at your job. You may not be the manager or the boss. But if you got a wife and kids, or you got a husband and kids, then you're a leader to those kids. You're a leader to your spouse. You're a leader to the person that you see every day, whether you are in some type of group or a club, whether you go to church. You're a leader there. You're a leader when you're out in public. You're a leader when you go to the grocery store. You're a leader when you're going to the bank, or you're on the bus, or you're on the train, or you're a leader in all these spaces, because you're leading somebody, and the number one person that you're leading each and every day is yourself. Because without leading yourself, you can't lead anybody else. If you can't connect with yourself, you can't connect with anybody else. So see, that's important when we think about the law of process, because we need to progress, and we need to have this process. We have to mind that we started somewhere small, and then we're growing to that. So we have to understand that um, that how we develop is, in the water and wastewater in the steam industry, we develop through studying, repetition, then we troubleshoot problems and emergencies and things like that. We have equipment that we have to look into and check, and then the knowledge, and then the mistakes, and all these things, and teaching others, and all of that grows into the process, because that's what we do when we're in the utility industries. Um, we're doing things in a process. No matter what industry, what field it is, or thing in the industry it is, we're doing a process. So um, and then we understand is that, why would we expect human and leadership develop to happen instantly when everything we operate is a process? So that's just how I think about it. And I think that that's something that we need to continue to have in our minds each and every day. So, well, what I'm working on with this law of process in my life is that I'm still learning, I'm still growing. I started to read consistently leadership material, and grow stronger in my faith, and all these things, but especially the leadership books and material that I've been reading by John Maxwell and other writers. I've been reading those consistently for about a year now. So I started in like the winter or spring of 2025, and it's been a year and a half almost. And I've been reading leadership books, and it's done changed me. It's done helped me to understand that most of the problems that we have in life are leadership problems. And the law of process shows that from 2025 at that time till now, I've been growing, and I've been seeing it in my daily life. And I haven't arrived. I haven't arrived at all, and I'm not perfect. And I think everybody needs to be aware of that when they grow in leadership materials and read books and all those things. Is that I'm not coming as somebody that is a guru. I'm not coming at people as if I got it all together. But what I am saying is that I'm growing. I'm learning the processes that I am. And I believe that God has given me the ability to self-reflect, and to grow, and to look at myself in the mirror and say, Jamel, is you. Is you that's got to change. Is you that's got to progress. You know, and I think that will help a lot of people, because, like I said before, I've been down a road in my life where things fell apart, and all those types of things. And then I get to this point, you can't forget where you came from. And I think sometimes God has um, a way of showing us that where we've been is something that we don't forget so that we won't make the same mistakes again and all those things. So that's what the law process is. But that's something that I'm working on, and I'm excited to keep growing. Um, and I think that's the reason why I created this podcast, and I created H2O Hustle, and it's about passion, purpose, and precision. And all three of those things shows me that it's about a process, and that process is helping me be a better person and a better leader, better father, better husband, better coworker, just all around better. And so I like to read and study these types of things, these types of books, and you know, wanting to be better at doing that, better at serving people, and not being self-centered, not being self-focused. I think that's a definitely a bad thing to do, is to be self-focused. So, but I want to read scripture out of the Bible where it talks about um, not having it all together, or you know what I'm saying, or not thinking that you arrived. And the Apostle Paul says in the book of Philippians, chapter 3, verses 12 through 14, he says, "Not that I have already obtained this, or I am already perfect, but I press on to make it my own, because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus." And that's what I want to live by. When I'm thinking about the law process, and that, you know, this is somebody that's considered in the scripture somebody that was on top of the world, because he wrote most of the books of the New Testament. But even him, he said, I haven't arrived. I haven't got this thing down. I'm still learning. And I think after all these years, I'm still learning as well. And I don't want to ever get to a point where I think I'm better than somebody, because, like I said, God he has a funny way of showing somebody something when they need to learn something. So, um, so again, the more I learn, the more I realize I still have much to learn. And I guess what it is, this is where I come to this point, is to ask you some questions, or ask you a question, is, to challenge you, where you are in the process of your life and your leadership and how you want to grow, is, where do you want to be from a year from now? And, people ask that question, but that's something that you really just sit there and think about it, sit with that, where you want to be a year from now. And, and then after that, then what do you need to start doing to consistently become that person, wherever you want to be, what do you want to do, or what do you want to be a year from now, and then what you need to consistently do to get there. And, spend 15 minutes a day, reading a book, or reading something, or praying, or going out in the nature, taking a walk, listening to a podcast or something, or something like that. Like, that's something that I believe that you can do to grow and to continue to be consistent in what you're doing, because it will help you. It'll help you to grow. And I think that if you choose an area for your growth, take the next month and just choose one area of growth. It could be listening, active listening. Maybe you got a family at home, and I'm probably just giving you a little bit, but maybe, be active listening. Us as husbands sometimes, we can sometimes not hear our wives or not hear our kids. Or it could be at work. It could be a situation at work where you know, can need to stop complaining. Need to stop coming in coming in and thinking that Monday is the worst day in the world because you got to go to work. There's some people out there that would kill to have your Monday because they don't have it. Or it can be, just showing compassion to somebody that really needs a hand or really needs prayer or really needs something. I think about that. And like I said, before, obviously I'm talking about the water and wastewater industry, but I'm not just talking about the job. I'm talking about life as well. And I think that that's important, to do all those things. And maybe, you want to study for a certification, or you get some extra training, or, leadership reading, or physical development, going to the gym or doing something like that, whatever it is that you need challenged with. I just say start somewhere, start with the possible, start with what's necessary, then start with what's possible, do what's possible, and then you're doing the impossible. Like I said in that quote earlier, I think that's good. 15 minutes may not look impressive today, but repeated consistently, it becomes part of the process. And I think that is very good for us to remember and to keep in our mind. We got, the more you start, the more consistent it is, the more it's going to continue to grow. And that makes me think of another book that I'll probably maybe do something in the future on, but it's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And in that book, he was talking about the concept of being 1% better. And that if we're 1% better each day of the year, then we're going to be 365 days or 365% better because we did something that's 1%, a 1% difference each day. And so the main thing about this whole thing is that the law of process is about growing. It's about starting somewhere and then growing each and every day to get there. And then we got to understand that, that a promotion or a certification or a new job title, new opportunity, that's not your entire story. That's just the beginning point. There's always layers to things. There's always things underneath the surface that we got to continue to grow and continue to be better. And, focus on who you want to become while you pursue the goals. And I think that's another thing that we have to understand, is like who I want to become. The journey, we always think about a destination. It's the journey. That's where the gold is. That's where the goodness is. It's in the journey. And I think that when we look at it that way, we continue to understand what the law of process is all about. Don't despise where you are. Don't look down where you are, because just because you're right at the point where you are doesn't mean that you're late. God always has a great blessing for those who continue to have faith and continue to look to him. And he says in Romans 8:28, he says, and we know that all things work together for the good to those that love him and to those that are called according to his purpose. So just because you think you had some bad patches in your life, or you think that your life's over with, or it's the horrible thing and you can't recover, don't believe those lies. Remember that even in that, God will use the negatives and the horrible things in the process to get you to grow, so that you can trust the process while you're growing. John Maxwell, with this law of process in the book, like I said, I wasn't trying to really give it as an overview of what the book was about, but I give him credit for it because I think it's a great law, and it's a good law for leadership, and there's plenty of more in there, like I said, that I would like to look into. But definitely encourage you to pick up the book. It's called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and it's by John C. Maxwell. And I want to thank everybody for listening today. And if you liked it, remember to like, share, subscribe, and continue following H2O Hustle and this series. I just, like I said, thank you again. And remember to keep studying, keep learning, keep showing up, keep developing. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. That's the main thing about the law of process. It develops daily, not in a day. Keep growing with passion, purpose, and precision. Until next time, y'all, keep hustling.